the Washington Post just announcing absolutely massive layoffs. And when I say massive, I mean like over a third of the Post's overall staff's been cut. We're talking more than 300 of the roughly 800 journalists in that newsroom. Even laid off a reporter who's in the middle of a war zone, who's in Ukraine covering the war with Russia. Because yesterday morning in a newsroom call, you had executive editor Matt Murray announcing the layoffs, which he described as a strategic reset that was overdue in light of what he called difficult and even disappointing realities. Saying the Washington Post has been losing too much money for too long while also failing to meet the needs of readers. While they didn't provide the public with basic information about its newsroom, subscriptions, or other financial data, you had Murray saying that the paper would be making a number of enormous cuts and major overhauls across numerous departments, and some functions will be just shuttered altogether, including the entire sports desk. So there, some reporters will stay on to write feature stories. Also similar, the book section will be shut down, and the newspaper's signature daily news podcast, Post Reports, has been canceled. Also beyond that, the Post's international desk will be shrunk down dramatically, and while some foreign bureaus will remain open, others are shuttering entirely. Right, with the Cairo bureau chief, for example, announcing on X that all of the Middle East correspondents and editors have been laid off. But also, some of the steepest cuts were made to the Metro desk, which covers DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Or with Murray describing the move as restructuring, though you had an anonymous Metro staffer who lost their job telling NPR that only around a dozen of the 40 people employed at the desk weren't fired. And very notably, we've seen multiple reports that all staff photographers were cut as well. And so with all these changes, it looks like the Post could be trying to set itself up to primarily be a federal paper that focuses on the US government and American politics rather than a holistic legacy media outlet. Right? And you have multiple former editors telling NPR that it looks like the paper's trying to compete more with specialized publications like Politico and Punchbowl News instead of the New York Times. And also, I think a big thing we have to touch on is while these layoffs and restructuring, they're absolutely huge, it's also not entirely unexpected. Right? The paper, it's been seriously struggling over the last few years, both culturally and economically. So, we saw things like in late 2023, Jeff Bezos, who owns the paper, hired British media executive Will Lewis as publisher and CEO to help the Post become more profitable amid falling audiences and subscriptions. But Lewis's tenure, it's been plagued with controversies, and he has consistently been at odds with his own newsroom, which he has increasingly distanced himself from, avoiding major meetings and announcements, even the one yesterday. And despite a series of experimental changes, including a big focus on AI, Lewis has failed to come up with a cohesive strategy for the paper's future, and the outlets just continue to struggle. And so over the last 2 years, there have been numerous rounds of layoffs, and many staffers have taken buyouts that Lewis pushed, encouraging employees to take the offer if they do not feel aligned with the company's plan. And so all of that, it already gutted the paper that Bezos' unfathomable amount of money once revitalized, with the Washington Post Guild saying that its workforce has shrunk by roughly 400 people in the last 3 years. And then, of course, you can't forget the moves that Bezos has made in recent years that have really alienated a lot of the audience. Right, last year, for example, he changed the paper's once esteemed opinion section to have a much more conservative tilt. And then, of course, there was his decision to kill the paper's planned endorsement of Kamala Harris in 2024, which is a move that resulted in mass cancellations of subscribers. So that's also why you have a lot of people blaming Bezos himself for the layoffs, arguing that he is literally one of the richest men in the world with an estimated $260 billion, and so he could easily prevent this if he really wanted to. Bezos, for his part, he's just remained silent through this whole thing. He has actively refused to respond to letters from multiple reporting teams pleading against the cuts, and he wasn't even on the call announcing these huge layoffs and historic changes. And so that's only prompted even more outrage and allegations that Bezos is abandoning the Post after driving it into the ground. Right? And so you have the Post Guild saying in a statement that if Bezos is no longer willing to invest in the mission that has defined this paper for generations and served the millions of people who depend on Post journalism, the Post deserves a steward that will. And that was also echoed by former executive editor Marty Barron, who accused Bezos of exacerbating the newspaper's troubles through ill-conceived decisions. Or suggesting that Bezos' pro-Trump pivot is what drove away readers and subscribers in the first place, also claiming that the layoffs were just part of Bezos' sickening effort to curry favor with Trump, and arguing that these firings are just going to backfire and result in even more canceled subscriptions. And personally, I'll say I'm inclined to believe that a lot of the bad that we're seeing right now, it's Bezos, yeah, he's getting on his knees, he's breaking out those knee pads. This man, in addition to having companies that have government contracts, which is a huge thing, also just released his propaganda piece Melania movie that they paid tens of millions of dollars for that many are just calling a bribe, within the same week that a third of his newspaper's journalists were fired. Bezos didn't luck into his success. He knows what he's doing. I think this is all happening at a time where it's more important than ever to invest in trusted sources and fact-based reporting to combat the constant growing flow of misinformation.